Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployhar from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about brain-based solutions for executive functioning success. And my guest today is Dr. Jan Bedell. She is someone who has spent decades helping children, teens, and adults optimize their brain function for better learning and life skills. Dr. Jan Bedell began her journey in 1992 as a homeschooling mom, seeking answers for her struggling learner, and that pursuit led her to become a master neurodevelopmentalist. Since then, she has developed special curricula, brain training tools, and programs that have helped thousands overcome learning challenges without relying on labels or medication. Dr. Jan holds a master's in special education, a doctorate in education, and a certified master's neurodevelopmentalist degree through the International Association of Neurodevelopmentalists. She is also the board chair of SPED Homeschool, the nonprofit that empowers this very podcast. Today, she's here to share practical strategies that parents can use to build strong executive functioning skills, helping their children develop focus, organization, and self-regulation. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Jan Bedell to the show. Dr. Jan, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Peggy.
Yeah, you're a regular guest on this show. You know, when this show airs, we're actually pre-recording it. It's going to air on Tuesday. It's our 8th anniversary of this show. Do you believe that?
That is amazing. It's been such a wonderful journey helping so many. We just appreciate all that you do.
Thank you. Yes. And so Jan was one of my very first guests on the show. So it's awesome to have you back. And I appreciate all the support you have provided through the years for our nonprofit work, SPED Homeschool, that powers this podcast and a whole lot more. We do a lot more than just the podcast, but yeah. So definitely check out spedhomeschool.com to learn more about that. And we'll talk more at the end. But I would just love, as we're starting out this conversation, because there's so much of this that's wrapped up in your story. But I would love to know what led you to discover the neurodevelopmental approach, and how did it change your perspective on learning?
Wow, that's a big topic right there. But in a nutshell, God brought me to the neurodevelopmental approach. I had a 15-year-old child with intellectual disabilities. We had tried public school, private school. I'd homeschooled her for 5 years. And at that point, I was about ready to give up because I just didn't know anything else to help her. You know, I was a certified teacher when she was born. I tried everything that I knew, during those 5 years of homeschooling, which at that point was barely legal.
Yeah, right.
That's how long ago that was. We've come a long way since then. That's for sure. But when God showed me the neurodevelopmental approach, like I said, I was at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do, and He just showed me a new way. You talked about how does this change my way of thinking about learning? I mean, it changed everything. It turned everything upside down, which was really challenging at first because I was a certified teacher,
Right.
I had this training and all the stuff. But, that just goes to show if you have the right knowledge, it doesn't matter if you have a degree or anything, any training or anything, you can homeschool your child with special needs. That's the big takeaway.
Right.
So Yeah, it's just a different way of looking at learning by looking at the root of everything, which is the brain. The brain controls
Yes.
everything. So I'm excited about, you know, giving that perspective to this executive function topic.
Absolutely, yes, and I love that you say, even though you had a degree, because I think a lot of people say, "Oh, if only I had this training, if I only had a college degree in this, then I'd be a good homeschool teacher." And I think actually the people that I've talked to over the years, I mean, I've been in this field for 25 years, they find it's actually harder because they have to kind of work backwards out of all the things that they've been taught are supposed to work and they don't. And
That is
and
so
then you've got so
true.
much
That
more to learn.
is
Yeah.
exactly what happened to me. I had to relearn a whole lot of things, and they worked a whole lot better. That's the
Yeah.
that's the really good part.
So starting from square one is actually a good thing because you're going to learn
Yeah.
how to teach your child versus how to just use methods. And I think that's a lot of what we think is going to solve the problem, but it's really child focused. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. But we're going to talk too about executive functioning. I know a lot of people talk about executive functioning, but maybe we don't understand it that well. So I'd love for you to explain what executive functioning is and why it's crucial to learning and success.
Well, we've had lots of labels come along the way. Executive functioning is a label for a group of symptoms, and they say that it's like a management system. That your executive
Okay.
function, if you think of it like maybe computer software that controls a lot of different things, they put different parts together. That's kind of what our executive functioning is in our brain.
Right.
But
Hmm.
the definition that they're using is it's like referring to your mental skills that enable you to plan, to focus your attention, to remember instructions, and also manage multiple tasks efficiently and
Yes.
effectively. So when I heard this last part, as I'm researching what everyone else is saying about this topic,
Yeah.
um, I thought about the difference in men and women in their executive
Ah,
functioning.
yes, that is a good
It,
point.
especially this multitasking part.
Right.
Women seem to be able to multitask. I don't know if at your house, if it's like this, but my husband's
Mhm.
very linear, this has to happen and then this and this and this. And you're over
Right.
there, with this happening and that happening, the phone rings and the pot stirring and all
Exactly.
the stuff.
Uh-huh.
So we really have, I think, two different types of executive functioning.
That's a really good point. I've never heard anybody talk about that before, so that's cool. Yeah,
Yes,
but
yes. So,
but it
so
it affects every place in our life though, doesn't it? I'd love
it
for you
really
to
does.
kind of expound on that because, I think sometimes we only think especially in this environment, we're talking about school, usually, but our lives pour into so many other areas, and I know this touches on everything, doesn't it?
It really does. It's kind of the overarching thing, and
Hmm.
it has, if it's working well, it's got positive effects. If it's not working so well, it's got some negative influences on things like
Ah, yeah.
academic outcomes,
Mhm.
your comprehension ability, your building ability to problem solve, and your time management skills, even your behavior or regulation, your self-monitoring. And
Yeah.
an interesting fact that I discovered is that this has been talked about since the later 1800s,
Oh,
but it
really?
was, yeah, I was kind of
Huh.
surprised that it had
Yeah.
been discussed that long ago, and then it resurfaced like in 1970, a little bit
Hmm.
more, but it has significantly had momentum in the last 20 years.
Yeah. I think probably in the last 2 or 3 is when I have been having more people approach me about talking about it, about writing about it, and so it kinda came on my radar like that. But why do you think from, like, your perspective that people are talking about it more and more now than ever before?
Yeah, I think what's happened is I relate it to kind of like a perfect storm. So in America, we're very privileged. We have lots of um, gadgets for our infants to be in.
Yeah.
We've got a lot, and some of it is socially driven. If you don't have the latest, greatest saucer or whatever the deal is,
Right,
you're
exactly.
or you're not, have your baby in the sling or whatever the current thing is, then you're not a good parent, or there's lots of
Yeah,
judgment
that
happening
is.
out there.
Yeah.
But so that is the first part of development, with a child being on their stomach, getting all that
Yeah.
information from moving and organizing their brain. So that
Mhm,
aspect of it has been a challenge. And
mhm.
then culturally, we were probably the first to adopt all the gadgets for the children to look at, all the screens
Yes,
and all of those kind of
absolutely.
things. And so, that's been happening. Um, and when you're doing lots of visual things, you kind of turn your auditory system off.
Yeah,
And
that is
not
true.
only are they using those gadgets, but culturally, we're not talking to our kids as much as we used to.
Yes,
We
that
used to
is true.
have meals and
Mhm.
talk around the table for long periods of time. Now we're just kind of throwing things over the back seat and say, "Eat on the way to soccer."
Right.
And while they're doing that, they're watching a movie. So there's lots of things that have changed that I believe have made a difference here.
Yeah.
And it's causing the brains to not work as well as they should. So we have all these symptomatic labels. Do you know what I mean by that? Symptomatic
Right.
labels?
Right. So basically, they're like like when my son was diagnosed with autism,
Mhm.
they basically went down the checklist and said, well, does he have this and this and this? And then if he had enough on the checklist, then he was diagnosed with autism, and now the crazy thing is now that we went, so he was 5 when he was diagnosed. He's 27
Mhm.
now. And my daughter was diagnosed a year and a half ago with EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which masks a lot of times as autism. And
Uh-huh.
it's a connective tissue disorder that affects the vagus nerve. So now going back and looking at that, yes, he qualified under a lot of those tick marks, but the poor child's been dealing with a connective tissue disorder that I
Mhm.
never addressed because I was thinking it was, just labeled autism when we were trying to fix what was wrong with him.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, a lot of parents fall into that category of, well, this is what we got, so now we have to fix it and use all these programs and other things to make my child kind of lean more to the normal part or learn how to cope with this diagnoses. And so I'm assuming that's kind of what you mean by labeling all of that.
Mhm. So, I've been in this work for about 30 years,
Yeah.
and used to, kids would come in with one label. They would be autistic, labeled autistic, or they would be labeled ADD or dyslexic or something like that. Now I have kids coming in with
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 labels, and
Yes.
they're adding executive function on top of it.
Yep.
What you'll find is there's interlacing symptoms. And so they're
Yeah.
adding all these labels. And, the sad thing is they're saying 1 in 5 kids has a learning disability in America.
Yes.
It's really gotten
Yep.
chronic.
Yeah, it definitely has. Yes, and just it increases our listener base, but not for the right reasons.
No.
So lots of parents out there that are they just don't know, and they don't even know how to help their child. So I would love if you could kind of go through each of these areas where it affects these executive functionings or lack of affect major parts of life, and just explore some solutions that parents can look into and consider. Just give us some hope that there's more than just, oh, well, here's your labels and now good luck.
Yes, there's much more to it than that. And that's really what my message has been all these years is there's hope for change because
Right.
the brain has such tremendous ability to change and grow. We just
Yeah.
need to know how to stimulate it in the right ways to make that happen.
Mhm. For
Well,
sure.
I want to give you some hope, but I just want to give you a little perspective to start with, and that's
Okay.
America is in such bad shape. We are spending like 700 billion with a B dollars on education, and we are ranking
Mm,
like 38th out of 71
that's
in
awful.
countries in math. Can you imagine? We're not even in the top half of the
Right.
world. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it just blows me away. And then 24th in science. It
Hmm.
is just incredible. And we're spending 38% more money on this education than the other
Yeah.
countries are. And so something is really not right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
so so we do just to give you the hope and the difference in looking at this. I'm always asking people to think differently. Don't think about all those labels and the limitations that those give and the coping and compensating they have to do for the rest of their life. Let's get to the root. So the difference in the neurodevelopmental approach is it's a very broad approach. It looks
Okay.
at, this may affect that. So we have to work on this before we work on that. So just an
Okay.
example, personal example in my case, my daughter was in speech for many years, and their goal was for her to talk in longer sentences.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm. It's
what
pretty
I found
typical.
out was her auditory processing, where she could hold pieces of information, was so short that she could not talk in longer sentences because she couldn't hold the information.
Oh, yes.
So we had to
Hmm.
work on that auditory processing, that short-term memory piece,
Hmm.
so that she could start working on longer sentences. And then, of course, to teach reading, we all most everybody in homeschool believes that phonics is the only way to teach reading. Well,
Right.
if you can't hold pieces of information together, and phonics is little pieces of information that you have to hold together to get a word out, then
Exactly.
a lot of struggles there. So it's this give and take of what's happening over here that's affecting us negatively.
Yeah.
Do you have the experience of your child just wiggling all the time and just sitting there just like this? Well, maybe they're
Yeah.
sensitive to their clothing, and we've got to
Yes.
desensitize that. It's not a problem of attention. It's a problem, it's a sensory problem. So,
Right.
there's all these different things. I mean, and then on the higher level with kids with dyslexia, for instance,
Hmm.
had this one mom, and she seemed to do everything right. She pulled her child out of school because he didn't think he was very smart, and she knew he was brilliant,
Yeah.
and had independently tested, and they said, "Oh, yeah, he's got 130 IQ, but he's got dyslexia." And
Oh,
so they went through that 2-year dyslexia program. After that, he's on grade level. I mean, he's smart enough to figure out how to
figure it
comprehend.
out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But he's having to work too hard. His mom kept saying, he's really smart and he's having to work way too hard to get done what he's getting done. Is there any hope for that? And so we found some different areas where his brain was not working efficiently. We helped her with activities to do at home to help that. And he
Right.
went up 4 grade levels, way above his age, more commensurate with his IQ, because he had a more organized brain. And we got to that root instead of just treating it one size fits all for dyslexia kind of thing example.
Right. That makes so much sense. And it's there, it's brings so much hope because a lot of times I think we're just told, okay, this is how your child's brain works. Now here's how we work around it. Instead of,
Mhm.
oh, here's how your child's brain works and here's how we can make it more efficient. There are ways to improve that. And I've loved reading a lot of your articles. You've written a lot for our website, SPED Homeschool, and talking about the plasticity of the brain and just how we can change even at our age. It can still get better.
Yeah,
So that gives so much hope. But it's so
exactly.
nice to know that there are ways that we can help our kids instead of just saying, okay, now let's figure out how we can figure out a path through this. It almost seems like this giant mystery. Um, and it's gonna just take them forever, or they're gonna work like the example that you just gave us so hard once we give them those strategies, and then, well, sorry, this is what you're going to be with, stuck with for life. You hate to do that, and so it just, that's so awesome that there's other things out there that parents can do with their kids to help them to move beyond and really grasp onto that intellect that they have. And really, I mean, yes, that your student had a high IQ, but this even works for students with low IQs. That right?
Yes, absolutely. It worked for my daughter, who had a very low IQ. So from it just releases the potential of the person. We can't always do
Right.
something about the IQ, but we can do something about the efficiency of the brain. So
Yeah.
whatever, you do have will be working to the optimum.
That's awesome. So a lot of parents will focus on just specifics of things where their kids struggle, especially in school, because we see them as we're teaching them. And so let's look at a couple of those, like reading comprehension.
Yes, that's a good one. And some people look at that very linearly. They just think, oh, they're not reading, so we've got to read a lot, kind of thing. But
Right.
really, there's a huge combination of things that, as far as brain function and skills, that you have to read.
Yes.
So let me just ask you this, or maybe your audience might have experienced this. Your child is reading along and they go to the end of the line, they come back and they start reading on the wrong line.
Oh,
Do you
yes.
think
Mhm.
that's going to affect their comprehension?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. And then the brain just goes on overload, like, what is happening here? That didn't make any sense
Right,
whatsoever.
exactly.
they just they just kind of, it affects everything. It's just affects your system, puts you on
Right.
on tilt, I guess, is what I
Mhm.
was thinking. But what would possibly be causing that? Maybe their eye tracking isn't working as well as it should. They
Ah,
come across and their eye has to track back, but it doesn't track to the right position. So that has nothing to do with remembering what you read. It has to do
right.
with how your eyes are working.
Hmm.
Or have you had this experience where your child's reading along and they're, pretty early in reading and they skip these small words? And you think, "What
Yeah,
in the world, that is an easy thing. Why would you just skip that word?" Or they call
right.
a the.
Mhm.
They see a small space and they call it the wrong thing because they're smart and they're reading by context at that point.
Yes.
So that could be how your central vision doesn't work as well as it should, how you see right in the center and
Hmm.
you just missed that word. So that's going to
Ah,
affect the comprehension as
right.
well, just because you missed the word, or they could miss part of the word and say stuck instead of struck or something like that. That's going to affect their comprehension.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then what about reading words? And it's so laborious that by the time you get to the end of the sentence, you don't remember what you read. That's
Right.
another thing. Or holding on to the pieces. Now that would be your short-term memory isn't working well. So that's going to affect your comprehension.
Right.
So there's lots of things that we've got to look at when we look at this one, what we would call a dysfunction or an inefficiency that's going on with a
Hmm.
child's ability.
Yeah,
Just have to drill down and see, what's really causing it. Now, I do want to give
absolutely.
you a quick technique that we started right away before we had, worked on my daughter's processing, worked on her brain organization, all the different aspects that we were working on. We started with something called echo reading. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, I've heard of different kinds of reading. I'm not sure which one you're referring to. I'm sure I've probably heard of it, but maybe not that term.
Well, it was quite counterintuitive for this certified teacher. I'll just have to admit.
Okay.
So basically, what you do is you take reading material, and I would suggest if they're really struggling to have as big a print and as clear a print as possible. No print in with pictures and all that kind of stuff that would distract.
Right.
And you actually read it to them first. You can draw your finger across so they're staying right with you, or if they just kind of zone out, you have them draw their finger across as
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
reading. Okay.
Hmm.
So you're reading it to them first, and then they read it to you afterwards. Now, a lot of people
Okay.
think, well, I'll read a paragraph, they read a paragraph. This is not that. This
Okay.
is different. Okay, so as a neurodevelopmentalist, we talk more about input, that's bringing things into the
Yes.
brain, than output. I believe that we ask for output often very much too soon,
Yeah.
especially when children are struggling. So you're actually reading the whole passage to them, whatever amount that you're going to read. They read the very same thing to you, and then you discuss it, talk about the details of it. And so you're prompting them about the topic, but
Right.
they've heard it twice already, and they're making less mistakes. They're more fluid in their reading because you've just read it to them. It
Yes.
works beautifully. It is amazing. Now,
That's
let me
awesome.
give you one little caveat to this about how much you should read to them, because
Oh,
every child's at a different level, right?
mhm.
So read to them the amount that when they read back to you, they only need help or make a mistake, maybe 3, maximum 4 times in that piece. So
Okay.
it could be 2 sentences, it could be a paragraph, it could be a page. So whatever level your
Right.
child is at, reading to them first is, again, counterintuitive because you want them to do it themselves. But
Right. Exactly.
it just works beautifully.
That's awesome. So what about those parents that say, "Wasn't that cheating?" Aren't I giving them the answers?
Well, here again, we're thinking differently, right?
Yeah.
If your child is having trouble in math, what good is it going to do to sit them down and say, figure it out?
Right.
It's just going to get them frustrated. It's going to get them not to like school. What if you just sat down and said, oh, this was close. Let me show you how it is. And you just do it for them. You know, there's a
Right.
whole different thing about teaching and expecting results. Again, I'm thinking we're
Yes.
asking for results way too soon. Fill in the blank. Um, which one of the multiple choice is the right one? We're always asking for output. That's how our curriculum is designed. So when I
Right.
say counterintuitive, I mean, wow,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it's very counterintuitive. It's really not cheating if you because you're teaching, you're giving them input.
Yes. That's a good
So
way, a
release
perspective
yourself from
on it.
that.
Yeah. Mhm.
It'll be a
Yeah, I
whole
think
lot more positive.
yeah, if you do take that approach, it and think of it, I'm teaching and not
Yeah.
testing, then you don't feel like you have to have as much output like you were talking about, and it alleviates that, and I love that. Those boundaries you gave us too, because I think a lot of times we're like, well, it, every child should be like a paragraph or a page or, but yet some may need a sentence and go from there. So that's
Yes.
awesome. So what about like problem solving? Because I know you talked a little bit about math and that, but I know problem solving covers even more than math. But for a child that, struggles in that area to figure out a problem, how can parents help with that area?
Okay, again, it's a big topic and there's multiple layers. But from the ND perspective, one of the biggest things about problem solving is your processing ability, and especially your auditory processing. Now, if that term
Okay.
is new to you, we have auditory and visual processing. It's another word for it is your short-term memory.
Okay.
So what you hold, like in computers, we used to have, we talked about RAM. I mean, it's still
Right.
very big in computers about RAM. That's your short-term memory. And then the storage goes on to the drive. So your short-term memory has a lot to do with problem solving, because if you can hold a lot of information in your brain at one time, in your short-term memory, you can see the big picture. You can see cause and effect so much better than if your processing is short, you can't see as much. So to problem solve, you really need to see the big picture and say, how's this going to affect that? And in all the different areas of your life.
Right.
And just think about, you mentioned math. So problem solving in math is picking out the important details, holding on to those, and figuring out, oh, am I subtracting? Am I borrowing? Am I
Right.
multiplying? What am I doing here with this information? So your processing is really big. Now, if you don't know a lot about that, we have a page on our website. I think Peggy's going to put the link there for you for auditory processing.
I will share the full length in the show notes because it's kind of long to put on the screen, but
Okay.
it's on the Brain Sprints website. But I will put that in the show notes so you can just click on it and go from there.
Yeah, and on there, it's going to tell you more about auditory processing, but it's also going to give you a test kit. So you can download
Awesome.
the auditory test kit and the visual, actually, too. There'll be both of them. And test your child and see where they are compared to where they should be according to their age.
Okay.
And it's also going to give you some really simple, little 2-minute activities that you can do each day to increase your processing ability. Not only find out where they are, which will give you a lot of insight into your child's
It
life,
will,
actually.
definitely. Yes.
You'll have a new perspective. Oh, that's why they can't follow directions. That's why, these different things are happening.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but then okay, it's good to know that information, but what do
Right.
I do? How do I make a difference there?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good resource. I would try to avail yourself of that.
Yeah. And you've had that available for a long time. And I know I've referred people to it for a long time on your website. It's just really good to give you that, like you said, a perspective of what you're kind of dealing with when it comes to auditory processing. And you had said earlier in the show, too, that the reason the kids struggle with this is because they tend to turn that auditory track off when they're seeing things more in pictures. So I think, just the frequency that we're seeing kids struggle in this area is just increasing more and more as we become more picture oriented, digital screen oriented, and kids are. And I even had a guest on, I think last week or the week before, but she said that because kids are on these devices, they actually learn to tune out voices of authority so that they can focus on their shows and not be distracted from a parent talking on their phone in the background. And so they're actually training their brain to turn that off and not just not activate it. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I have never even thought about how much that is going on as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of issues in there, and we need to be proactive and work on those.
Yeah, it's part of that perfect storm that I was talking about.
Right.
It really is. And what we're finding, and I don't know for sure if this is from ear infections or exactly what is causing this, but a lot of the kids that I see have hypersensitivity to sound. And so as a
Oh,
defense mechanism, they turn off their auditory. So, the parents can be calling their name and calling their name. They're watching a show or doing a game or something, and
right.
it's like they don't even hear him. The parents say, "I'm gonna have to take him and get his hearing tested because I don't think he can hear." But it's not
Hmm.
that at all. He's hypersensitive, and so it's like, I've got to tune this out so that I can survive even.
Right. Yeah. That is true. Yeah, I'm sure we will find in the years to come somebody will do some study and give us more perspective on why that's happening. I know my daughter walks around and she uses those earplugs that allow you to hear people's voices, but kinds of tunes out everything else. That helps her a lot to focus. But
Mhm.
yeah, that is interesting. I never really thought about that before. So I know another area is time management. Lots of parents are going, why is my child never on time, never, doing the things that they're supposed to be doing? Their room is a disaster. There's just so much going on and they're not in the middle of any of it.
Yeah, that's we're definitely dealing with that in our culture. And traditionally, what they're recommending on a lot of these when they're talking about executive function, um, what I'm finding is coping and compensating. And what I mean by that is you've got this low skill, use these other devices to help you, like use a planner, use a to-do list, use an alarm to go off at a certain time that tells
Right.
you, to do something. Um, some people use the visual clocks. I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
that, visual timers, so that
Right.
the
They have
time,
like the
it's
colors and the
red and then
red
it
and
gets
yeah. Hmm.
and to help them to see visually, oh, time is running out. So all of those to me are, I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, but it doesn't get to the root. Why is this time management situation happening? And you
Right.
mentioned disorganization, like of their room and all of that kind of thing. It comes from a disorganized brain. And when your brain is not organized, it causes a ripple effect in your functional
Yeah.
ability. So that's why you do have to use all of these different things to help you with time management. But my encouragement is let's get to the root and organize that brain so it's not causing so much havoc in that area.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, because when it's all scrambled inside, everything's going to be scrambled outside. So,
Exactly.
yes. So your child's room is a mirror of their brain. That's a scary thought for most of us.
Yes, for sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I can relate to with my grandchildren's room. We're working on that.
yes. What about like behavior regulation, self-monitoring? I'm
Mm,
assuming that all falls kind of in this category as well.
yes. If you've experienced something like a breakthrough in math, for instance, and you just are so excited and your child's so excited and you're just celebrating, and the next day you get that same book out and you open the book expecting wonderful things to happen, and they just look at
Right.
you like, are you going to teach me this? And like they look at it like they've never seen it before. And
Right.
have you ever had that? It's like,
I
oh my
when we had adopted kids that had experienced a lot of trauma, that was a daily thing. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, we did something good. And then the next day there was nothing there. And it was so frustrating because, yes, like
Yes.
you said, we even celebrated it. It was awesome. And then it was not there again.
Exactly. So when you've got the frustration and the negative self-talk like that, like, oh, there must be something wrong with me because mom said I knew it yesterday and now I don't know
Right.
it. Then it's very challenging for that behavior to be regulated. Um, and also the emotions involved in all of that. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
believe that the root of that is, where is the information stored, which has to do with your dominance. I don't think we have time to go into a ton of that today, but basically, if you're right-handed and right-eyed and right-eared, your
Yeah.
information is going to be stored in a better place for you to bring it out a lot easier.
Oh,
So that's more of the root of that. But the it also causes when you're mixed dominant, like say you're right-handed, but your left eye is dominant, or your left ear, or both, then it's going to cause you to go into your emotional hemisphere of your brain more often and more
oh,
easily. So when you combine low processing, which means you're acting like a younger child,
right.
and this emotional swing to your subdominant hemisphere, it just, again, another perfect storm of where it's like makes it very challenging to do anything really. So
Yeah.
storage is one example, and then just being able to follow directions. This also causes so many challenges in the home because you tell your child, go upstairs and get your shoes and socks and come back
Right.
down. We've got to go. We've got to go.
Uh-huh.
And you're getting ready. And pretty soon you're stomping up the stairs because you're mad because guess what? They're not there.
Right.
They did
Right.
not follow the directions you gave them.
Exactly. I'm sure
And
a lot of my listeners can relate.
you're looking at you go upstairs, you look at them and say, "What are you doing?" And they just look at you like, "Was I supposed to be doing something?"
Right.
Just so innocent, and you just want to lose your mind because
Right.
it's like, oh, it's so frustrating. So here again, they have failed, and their behavior is it's a challenge, and then you're upset with them, and they go into the emotional hemisphere, and then it's a huge mess.
Yeah.
Um, and then some of our families are struggling with kids with OCD, and
Mhm.
a lot of the behavior can come from several different places. It can come from our sin nature, obviously. It can
Right.
come from the internal aspect, in that there's allergies and things like that that cause all kinds of behavior
Oh,
challenges.
yes.
There's neurodevelopment, obviously, is their brain organized so that they can have the appropriate behavior. And then I think spiritually, again, there's issues there. That's my personal belief, that there's 4 different areas that could cause behavior. So one of the things that I offer my clients is something called positive situation recordings.
Oh.
So you want me to describe that for
Yeah,
you?
definitely go into that. I'd love to know.
Okay, so you want to take 2 or 3 things that are going on with behaviorally with the child, and you want to make a recording, and you have to make the recording because it's specific to them. You're going to say the recording in everything that you say is going to be in first person, just like they're talking to themselves. Okay.
Okay.
So you're going to say, when I get angry, I fold my arms like a pretzel and I take a deep breath. whatever you want them to do instead of what they're doing, like lashing out and hitting somebody or
Right.
whatever, that's what you put on the recording. And you can say it
Okay.
in whatever way you want to say it. Or you could say, when somebody makes me angry and when I'm at home, I run to my bedroom and hit my pillow 3 times. So again, just something that's appropriate or that you're okay with them doing to let out that negative behavior instead of the recording. So basically it's just like putting a new recording in their head.
Right.
When this
Like,
happens, I'm going to do this instead of the recording that's running right now that's not working for them.
ah,
It works for kids with OCD as well. The children with fears and phobias, you can quote scriptures on there to reinforce, but it's just talking about this is the way it really is. This is what if they have negative self-talk or whatever,
right.
God hasn't made any junk. He
Mhm.
he made us and said it's good.
Right.
And
Yes.
all those kinds of things. So after what we suggest is they listen to it a couple of times a day,
Right.
and over a period of time, you'll start to see those things start to happen instead of
Yes.
what's currently happening. So it's a way to help reprogram that stinking thinking, I guess is what I would call
Right.
it.
Exactly.
um, to a better solution, while, in my view, while you want to be working on these other things to make it the whole thing be easier.
Yes. Yeah. It's that's very scriptural too. We're supposed to replace the lies with truth.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and we want them to have that new truth, that new way of acting. I remember when I was dealing with depression, that's how I replaced those negative thoughts that were always going through my brain. Was I would post scripture around my house, and I would just stop every time I saw a post-it note or whatever it was and read it out loud and replace what was going on in my brain at that point with what was true. And
Mm.
over time it changed, and that, but you have to be proactive. And so you're you're giving us proactive solutions that will change the behavior as well as the brain and how it's organized and set apart. So I would love for you to share with our audience one or two success stories from the past, just to give them some hope about how this neurodevelopmental approach and using brain-based solutions can really help a child who's really struggling with these executive functioning skills.
Okay, well, where do I start? 30 years worth of testimonies. Typically,
Yeah.
when we ask for at the end of a program, so what we do is train the parents what to do at home to fix these things. Like, for instance, if they're too sensitive tactily, then we would help them with activities that would form new pathways actually in their brain that
Right.
help the brain say, oh, this isn't bad. This works. This isn't a bad thing. I don't have to react negatively to this. Or, like I was talking about with the auditory processing, building those skills so that they can see things more in a broad way. So
Okay.
in 6 different areas, we work on tactile, auditory, visual, their handedness to make sure they're using the right hand, and work on things like, is their brain even identifying these muscles?
Ah,
That's,
yes.
sometimes we work on handwriting techniques, and one child said to me, how can I write like that if my hand feels like fluff? And you're
Hmm.
going, your hand feels like fluff. Do you
Yeah.
mean? So he's describing this immature pathway from his brain to his hand that does not allow him to make those
Ah,
things. So instead of just, working on handwriting,
Right,
we
because
actually,
this curriculum doesn't work, and now I gotta go to this curriculum, and which curriculum's gonna work? And yet all the time they just needed you.
yeah, they just need a new pathway.
Right.
So that's what we do, is equip the families with activities to do at home to fix these different areas of challenges. And what our feedback has gotten, when we ask them at the end to describe their progress or whatever they feel has happened, typically they say just life-changing has been the action, or the reaction, I should say. So what we see is children that were struggling with reading don't struggle as much because we're working on all the different things that I kind of alluded to here. Are their eyes
Right.
working right? Can we help that? Not whether they can see up close and see far away. That's what the doctor takes care of. But are
Right.
they tracking correctly? Are they converging their eyes so that they're putting the image correctly so they can see those words and they don't swim around on the page and that
Right.
kind of thing? So that they typically, families just say, um, it's just been life changing in every way because their emotions come down. I had one lady say, um, the child got better at hockey, you know.
Oh,
uh,
yes.
Unexpected. The child is riding a bike. He's 11 years old and he's never been able to ride a bike before.
Wow.
Some children struggle going up and down stairs, for instance, and
Oh,
because if their vision isn't working right, their depth perception is challenged, and sometimes they just balk at going up the stairs at all. If it's
right.
severe at all, and it causes huge anxiety issues in um, other settings, other social settings than home that they're used to,
Right.
when they just don't see, you know, the difference in the steps, and it's really scary for them.
Wow.
Parents can't understand it because it's like, it's just a step. Just put your
Right.
foot out there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's it's a whole we're so complex. We are just um
Yes.
fearfully and wonderfully made in so many
Absolutely.
different areas.
Yeah.
So um
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
other it's
Well, I'd love for you to just tell people where they can learn more about brain-based strategies and where they can start. And hopefully that's your website.
yes. Yes, they can go to the website, or there's another link here for our foundations program that covers
Yes,
a
I will share
lot of
that.
just the foundational aspects of development to make sure they go through those steps. We've had people that have gone through that and they just say, oh my gosh, the child's not having trouble reading anymore. They're doing well in math. Their behavior is regulated. They don't, uh, they're not upset every morning because their socks aren't working right.
Right.
That seam is in the wrong place and it's driving them crazy. Um, Things like that can be helped with just our foundational program. And we do have
Awesome.
a discount code
Yes,
for
I
you.
saw that.
Yeah, you
Yes.
just put
You
SPED with all caps in.
SPED.
And,
Yep, and I'll put
mhm,
that in the show notes too. That's awesome.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and at our website, there's all kinds of free resources to help you understand. I've asked you to think differently about a lot of things, and it's a lot to take in sometimes. But if you're one of those that likes to really dig into the details and that kind of thing, we've got free articles on the website,
Awesome.
and
And
a
you have a
way to go
YouTube
to
channel
pod.
too, right? With
Oh
lots of
yes,
information.
I
Yes.
forgot to put that on there. Yes, our YouTube
Yep.
channel is Brain Coach Tips. That's Brain Coach Tips on YouTube.
Mhm.
And
Awesome.
lots of training there of in discussion about some of the things we've talked about today, how
Right.
to help in the different areas. So thanks for remembering that. I forgot to put that
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Yeah,
in the
absolutely. We've
links.
got so many resources. It's good to be able to send people your way and to find out information. So that foundations program you talked about, what age is that written for as far as students go?
So we have the foundations is basically 7 and up.
Okay.
Um, And we do have some other programs that you could do for younger children. That's
Okay.
called Early Learning Foundations, and an option for you to, if you're confused about where you might need to start. But if you have a younger child, I would look into Early Learning Foundations, and we do have consulting. Free consulting
Yes.
if you want to talk to someone about your situation and what the best direction is. We do have individual evaluations as well for more involved situations, but we found that the foundations is a great place to start. And the neat thing about it that's evolved over time is that they're using it for multiple family members. And
Okay.
this is really beneficial to those that have adopted and have several children that they've adopted. Um,
Right.
that is something that's really been helpful. Just use one program and it helps them all. And one thing that you ask about testimonies. A lot of people have said just using those movement activities in the foundations has helped the child's emotional regularity and also their emotional challenges with trauma that they've experienced.
Oh, wow.
Adoption, even if it's from the birth table into the adoptive parents' arms, there's still trauma
There is,
involved
yes.
with
And
that.
I think one of my guests a couple weeks ago, actually was one of my co-hosts interviewing.
Um,
I was watching the reels, I was doing the shorts and listening to the conversation, but she said the anxiety and the all of that mom has if her system is off as far as her ability to just handle stress and all of that translates then to the baby, and their
mhm.
nervous system is just as much whacked out as mom's is when they're pregnant. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've never heard that information, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it really does. And I hadn't really thought of that in this context, so I'm glad you brought that up because
Yep.
just not even having the rejection and abandonment that you have when you're adopted, but
Right.
again, whatever's affecting the mom while you're in utero is going to
Uh-huh.
affect you as well. So that's
Right.
a good point.
Yeah.
But God is making a way, and I know a lot of
Exactly.
my prayer was to have some feasible help for my child. I knew about
Right.
something that was too far away and too expensive, and I couldn't get to it, and it just was very deflating. And but I know that those that are seeking answers, he's got some answers for you. So just keep
Absolutely.
looking. If we can help
We'll
in
keep
that
you
area,
praying. Yeah,
we would love to. Yeah, it's
that's
um,
awesome.
it's such a
Yeah.
rewarding. I mean, I just wanted to be a wife and mother when I got out of high school and college, and if you had to work, this is the kind of business to be in. It's just life changing, and I've
Oh.
loved it ever since.
Well, God has fit you very perfectly, Jan, for this work, and I am so thankful for you. And I'm just excited to share your resources. Definitely check out brainsprints.com and all the individual links that we'll share in the show notes too, to get to all of those other resources that Jan talked about on her website and her YouTube channel. So you don't have to write down any long URLs; just click the buttons. We'll do all that work for you. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Jan. This has just been a delight as always.
Thanks.
And it's fun having you on the show again. And I'm sure this will not be the last.
I have lots to say. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we like to hear it. So thanks so much for sharing with us. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to today's episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations. If you're looking for more resources, support, and encouragement on your homeschooling journey, be sure to visit Homeschool Heroes powered by SPED Homeschool. At Homeschool Heroes, you'll find free downloads, a supportive community of parents, homeschool-friendly providers, and expert consultants ready to help you teach your child with confidence. Plus, explore tools, products, and services designed to simplify your homeschooling efforts, all from a trusted nonprofit that understands the unique challenges of homeschooling children with learning differences. Join us at spedhomeschool.com to connect with resources, inspiration, and a community that's here for you every step of the way. Let us make your homeschooling journey extraordinary. And next time here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations, we're going to be talking about alternative education models for homeschool success. I have a special guest that will be joining me to talk about things to approach homeschooling that maybe you haven't even considered as far as approaches. Because we have some traditional ones, but he goes into some that are a little different. So you'll want to listen to that conversation with Jonas. That'll be coming up next time. Well, thank you again, Jan. Always a delight. And thank you all for joining us. And we will see you next time here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Goodbye and God bless.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com